Books make you hope. Books make you dream. Books make you laugh. Books make you scream. This is the Books That Make You show, discussing books with authors and experts, unraveling the inner pages of all the books that help make us who we are.
Welcome, one and all. It is time for the Books That Make You show. I'm your host, Desiree Duffy, and today we're talking about books that make you become an equity warrior. The women who came before us, they created space for all of us. They did it for us to give us opportunities, and so that we could grasp the things that they could never quite reach themselves. According to our guest today, Lesley Michaels, the legacy that they left behind is simple. Create your own space and own it. Lean into your womanhood. Celebrate your potential. Her book is called On the Shoulders of Mighty Women. It is a modern feminist's guide to equitable diversity in our world. In it, Lesley Michaels takes you on an exploration of life and womanhood, feminism, and the often disorienting effects of the three that sometimes collide as women struggle to hold up sometimes more than their half of the sky. Now, Lesley was born into feminism. Her foundational ethos was shaped by her audacious paternal grandmother, who I'm excited to learn more about, who was a first wave feminist and a savvy businesswoman herself. And Lesley came of age, I should say, just as that second wave of feminism became a significant American social movement. I think nowadays we're on to the fifth wave or the sixth wave. We'll talk about that. Maybe we're still in the fourth wave. We'll figure that out as we get going here. Now, she was one of the first women to break through the glass ceiling in the old boy industry of oil and gas, which I can only imagine. She became a leader in the coaching industry. Lesley has mentored Fortune 500 C-suite executives. Today, she facilitates virtual programs on topics ranging from discovering personal freedom through self-trust to building strategic alliances of women. She also hosts the weekly podcast, Women We Should Know. Lesley, hello. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Desiree. It is a privilege to be on your podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so lay it down for us. There's so much to unpack in your book and your premise. So why don't you, in your own words, describe your book, On the Shoulders of Mighty Women?
It is three parts in my mind. It is one part, my memoir, which is an introduction to the reader to understand all of the different waves that I went through to come to my perceptions of where women are and how we can move forward. It is another part substantiating data so that the reader can know and read and reference that I'm not just coming up with this off the top of my head. And then it is very importantly, the third part is a call to action, a call to women to take different action on behalf of themselves, their sisters, their daughters, and their granddaughters.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I love about the premise of your book is this idea of standing on the shoulders of mighty women, standing on the shoulders of giants, right? We've heard that term before. And just realizing that your grandmother, grandparents, mine, all of the women who came before us have done so much to get us to where we are. And it feels like sometimes we take steps forward and we slip back. But for the most part, we keep going forward. Tell us a little bit about, let's start with your grandmother, your paternal grandmother who inspired you. Tell us a little bit about her and how she impacted your journey.
She was a sassy broad, I will tell you. She was great. At 15, the traditional marrying age back when she was 15, she was very well aware she did not want to be another farm wife. And so she convinced the young man who had been courting to elope to another state. Well, they set up housekeeping, had a few kids, but she had bigger visions. And over time, she developed a friendship, her best friendship, with a woman who happened to be the bank owner's daughter. Because back in those days, banks were actually owned by human beings. What a concept. Anyway, so that became her champion and her advocate. Her best friend lobbied to her father endlessly until he finally relented and loaned my grandmother, the money to have a business and a home in her own name. I am confident he thought she would fail, and she did not. And over the years, he came to respect her greatly. I got to know him just a little bit before the end of his life. But that was my introduction, Desiree, to the power women have when they advocate and champion for each other.
Absolutely. I think it's interesting too. We can really become closed off to the plight of women, even just a generation ago. I remember recently being in a conversation and telling somebody that it was only in the 70s that women could even open a credit card in their own name.
That's right.
So knowing that your grandmother was able to get a loan from a bank back then, like that was huge, because they didn't, women for all intents and purposes were considered, pretty much the property of their husbands. So that's really an amazing journey. So let's talk about modern feminism and where we are today.
Yes.
Can you break that down for us a little bit?
Modern feminism is the continuation of what has always been. And it is the call to women to stop playing the games of internalized misogyny, the games that were given to us by the patriarchy, the games that were sustained by many mothers and grandmothers. Oh, just let him think that he's the boss. And then you go back behind him and do what you want. These are all diminishing traditions that unfortunately are still alive and well. The other thing that modern feminism is doing is calling out women who are participating in what Harvard Business Review and Forbes have referred to as a epidemic of women to women incivility in the workplace. So modern feminism is about us coming to understand there is not limited real estate. And as long as we hold other women down, trying to protect that little square piece that we call our own, under the belief that there is limited real estate, that will continue to be the case. And when we start owning our space and knowing that we can own any space and being in support of one another, that can change the entire pattern of moving into equity much more quickly.
I could not agree with you more. And I know that's something that you bring up in your book because of your experience too in the oil and gas industry. I know for myself, going back to my early days of radio, it did feel like a zero-sum game. It did feel like there was only so much equity, because guess what? The men program directors told me that outright. They said, there are 5 full-time jobs at this radio station. We can only have 1.5 women on the air. So not only within that industry, but you have to feel like in a lot of industries with this quota mentality, women, unfortunately, have been taught that they have to fight for that equity. And I love the fact that you're saying, hey, that's not true. That's not the way it is, right?
Absolutely not the way it is. The reason they could only have 1.5 women is because the mass majority of women out there were not calling the radio station in mass daily, demanding to hear more female voices on the radio. And this is just one example of the things we can do to uplift each other.
Yeah. So let's go into your history then when you started out in oil and gas, because that was definitely an old boys club, wasn't it?
That was an old boys club. it was quite a surprise to me. My point of focus in study had been psychology, but through a series of events that could only happen by happenstance, I ended up in oil and gas, leapfrogged up to the executive status. It was grueling, Desiree. Every single day was absolutely grueling because of the women.
Mm-hmm.
The condescension, the undermining, the competition, the devious techniques for making you look bad.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, first of all, it was a shock to me. I have to tell you, Desiree, it was absolutely a shock. I was raised by a suffragette grandmother when I'm at the younger end of the boomer generation. So when the women's liberation movement was really gaining momentum and we were really pushing for the Equal Rights Amendment in 1970, I did what hippie kids do. I stuck out my thumb and hitchhiked all the way to New York into the women's movement. But ultimately, I had to buy groceries. So I went back to Middle America, and through a series of connections of my grandmother's, I ended up in oil and gas.
Mm-hmm.
But I realized, so all of this was shocking to me. I had never met women like this. I'd never even heard of women acting like this. So I stayed for 6 years, and then I left and decided never again. Never again. I'm going to go out and find a way to make different spaces, to create safer spaces, to create more productive spaces for women. So over the time, I built and either sold or crashed a few businesses, but I made my own way.
Yeah, yeah. Now, is this why you say, or maybe I should ask you, why do you say the moment is here for setting down the burden of what we've been taught about womanhood and cease to pass it forward to our daughters and younger sisters as the most unkind gift we could possibly offer? Is that where that comes from?
Absolutely. The unkind gift is the internalized misogyny that women pass from one generation to the next, which is a byproduct of the patriarchy, which, just for the record, I do not see patriarchy as men.
Mm-hmm.
Patriarchy is a system. And it's nothing as personal as a human being operating from this. It is a system that human beings have adopted. So it's time to set down internalized misogyny, which begins with identifying it in ourselves. And that's one of the things I do when I work with women in groups, is to create a safe space where they can begin to own and claim and notice their internalized misogyny. Notice how they are using it to oppress themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And when they cease to do this, they also cease to project it onto other women.
And it's really interesting that you say that, because I've encountered, it's usually men who insist they are not misogynistic. They are not. But you're basically saying it's not a personal thing. It's
No.
systemic within our culture.
Yes.
And women can be part of the patriarchy too. And likewise, men can be feminists. I'm always amazed at men who are like, I can't be a feminist. Of course you can, right?
Absolutely. A lot of that comes from the fact that there is a misunderstanding of what a feminist is and what feminism is.
Mm-hmm.
I speak to women all the time who say, oh, I'm not a feminist. Some don't even like the word.
Mm-hmm.
And I always ask them, what does it mean to you? It means you have to hate men. You have to do this and that and the other. That is just outrageous. A feminist is someone who believes that every human being has the right to equality in every area of life. That's all. Mm-hmm. And a feminist is one who is actively pursuing that goal on behalf of not just themselves. I know quite a few men who very proudly call themselves feminists.
Mhm. Yeah, I have too. I have too.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there are, with us and maybe not with us anymore, people who have taken that word and they've perverted it. And
Yes.
I think taking that word back, because like you said, words have meaning. And
Yes.
when people use the word the incorrect way, they can't allow that meaning to prevail. You can't allow somebody else to take your story, take your narrative, take your words, take your meanings, and pervert them like that.
And the perversion of those two words, feminist and feminism, were a very conscious act
Mm-hmm.
on the part of the individuals who were so intimidated by the idea of feminist and feminism that they weaponized those words by giving them extreme and oppressive definitions and marketing those definitions broadly and unfortunately with great success.
Yeah, I could not agree more. So, fast forward today, we've talked about the first, second wave of feminism. What wave of feminism are we on? I hear different people with different ideas. Are we still in a wave? Because I feel like even within the last few years, with some of the women's marches and things happening, that we're experiencing another, at least a surge, right?
We're definitely experiencing a surge. For the most part, what I hear and what I experience is that we are in a third wave.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this does not mean that nothing happened in between the waves. It just means that there are these peak crucial moments and moments when women were truly struggling for voting rights and the rights to even have a credit card. And then my early generation peers, and they were fighting for the right to be listed in the Constitution of the United States as equally protected to all men. Now we're coming into a space where we have these amazing millennials and Gen Zs who, to a great degree, just didn't buy in to these old paradigms. I would not say that they did not buy in wholly, but to a great degree, they did not. And so they are ready to speak more boldly, more loudly, and to claim their space. And we're also living in a world that is much more dangerous for many more people. And that is part of the motivation behind these younger generations of women to push feminism forward.
Yeah. And I'm just going to call out the elephant that's in the room with us nowadays. Women's reproductive rights
Yes.
are under full assault, full attack. And when we talk about equity, we're talking about equity for all. So it's LGBTQ plus, it's
Yes.
all persons. So what message do you have for those millennial women that are, kind of, hey, wait a second, I didn't know this was the world I was buying into. What message do you have for them today?
Don't quit. It's a journey. It's not a sprint. I did not 20 years ago imagine I would be fighting the same fight again a second time in my lifetime. But we cannot quit because it is not just reproductive freedom that is at stake. There are 32 states poised and positioned with their laws written to outlaw all contraception. All contraception. And I won't go into all of the other laws that are poised and written and positioned, but it is actually an attack against women. It is not just an attack against our reproductive freedom. It is an attack against women and women's rights and women's ability to be free. And what I would say is take heart. We would not be experiencing this much fight against us if it weren't for the fact that we have gained and are continuing to gain such power. It is the individuals and the forces that are coming from a space of fear. And as long as we continue to bond more together, more and more and more, and come together more and more and more, we will maintain our space because we are 50.53% of the population. We are the greater percentage of the population. We can claim our space, but we have to keep going together.
And maybe, just maybe, the fact that this is happening now in history has advantages because of the fact that we have come far enough, but yet there are, because I hear it all the time, women say, I never thought I'd have to fight this fight again. I was there fighting for the ERA in the 70s and the 80s. I didn't think we'd slip this far back, but it's because we have women who are like, wait, this is in my memory. This isn't in the memory of my grandmother. This is recent, that women as a whole aren't going to be, and men too, aren't going to be willing to give up that much ground nowadays.
No, we will not be easily silenced at this point. And every single day, I hear from more and more men who have one question. How can I help?
Yeah. And to those men, to the men, what do you say? What do you tell them?
I tell them to learn to understand what we want, to educate themselves about the data of inequity, and then to look around their lives and see where they have not been noticing that it is alive and well, and start there. Don't go out and try to change the world on your own. Look in your family, your immediate family, your extended family, your family of friends. Where is misogyny laughed off? Where is it okay? Because, well, that's Uncle Charlie. And be the voice that stands up. Because it is within those types of situations always more powerful when a male is calling Uncle Charlie out than when a woman is calling Uncle Charlie out.
That is so true. Who from the past, which feminist, other than your paternal grandmother, who came before you, do you look to and admire the most?
Oh, there are a few. I have such respect for Hattie Purvis. She was fighting for so much more than just the right to vote and just women's right, being a Black woman and being the first woman to take those steps. She goes unacknowledged daily. Such respect for her. I also have great respect for Eleanor Roosevelt. Now, we all look at Eleanor and we know that she was wise and she had great things to say and she made great contributions. But I also respect the way she lived. She wasn't going to stay in the White House with her husband and his mistress. The only way she would stay married to him was if he built her a new home of her choice. And she did that because she knew she could maintain a powerful voice. But she did it on her terms. She didn't compromise. So I always look to her.
Yeah. Now, you have a podcast as well. Would you like to tell everyone about your show?
Thank you so much, Desiree. I do. It's called Women We Should Know. And the entire purpose of that podcast is to highlight women who are out in the world, who are coloring outside of the lines, who are challenging the status quo because they refuse to get into boxes created by other people. And they are having impact, but they are not nationally known names. And yet these are women who are standing up for all of us. And so I love bringing those women on, having conversations with them, letting more people be impacted by the wisdom they bring, and giving them a broader sphere.
I love that. That's excellent. So your book, On the Shoulders of Mighty Women,
Yes.
while you were writing it, while you were researching it, while you're putting part memoir, part self-help book, part advice, while you were doing that, what did you learn about yourself, Lesley, on that writing journey?
Oh my goodness, do we have days? I really got to recontextualize how I am in the world. I got to take all of those messages that I learned from my paternal great grandmother and from the other four mighty women who I speak of in the book, to whom I give tribute by virtue of the title. I got to look at all of those things and notice, what did I let stray that I want to pick up? What have I hung on to that is out of date?
Mm-hmm.
And where are the gaps in my understanding, because we are this many decades later? And how do I come into a space within myself where I can really settle into hearing more than speaking? Because in order to understand what the millennial women, the Gen Z women want, and what they have to contribute, and what their concerns are, and what their misunderstandings of what we didn't do rest, I'm going to have to become develop a great ability to not just listen, but to actually hear. I would say those are the top points.
Yeah. All right. What does the future hold? I mean, I know you just wrote this book and released it, but is there another book? I know you're doing workshops and you're doing coaching. What's next on the horizon?
What's next on the horizon is to speak to more and more women all the time, to continue to be loud and to be bold and to be an example that we can, and that not every day is a good day. Not every day is a good day. But that is not a reason to quit.
Absolutely.
Because we're not quitting on what we're striving for. We're quitting on who we are.
Very true. Lesley Michaels, author of On the Shoulders of Mighty Women. Where can people go to find out more about you, get your book, get more information?
LesleyMichaels.com. And I'm just going to say, because it's unusual, because I have a British mother, it is Lesley, not the traditional Leslie. So it's Lesley Michaels.com. You can find out about me. There is a link to purchase the book, all kinds of information continually updated about what I'm into and up to.
Fantastic. Lesley Michaels, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been so insightful. I enjoyed our conversation so much. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Desiree. It was wonderful.
You bet. And thank you, everyone, for joining as well and being with us here today on the Books That Make You show. You can find out more about us. Our website is booksthatmakeyou.com. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe and ring the bell for notifications so that you never miss a show or a conversation with insightful authors and writers like Lesley Michaels. Until next time, all of my bookish buddies, please enjoy all of the books that make you who you are.
The host and executive producer of the Books That Make You show is Desiree Duffy. Sound mastering and engineering by Dave Napox. Social media and content promotion by Siddhi Jahagirdar. Copywriting and editing by Mike Robinson. The Books That Make You show is an award-winning podcast produced by Black Chateau Enterprises.